Shabbat Shalom. As a child, I always looked forward to the annual showing of the Ten Commandments, the 1956 Hollywood version of the Exodus. Despite being 3 hours and 20 minutes long, at least, the film ends just after the cinematic episode of the Golden Calf, with the stentorian voice of Cecil B. DeMille announcing, and I paraphrase a little, "Thus they spent 40 years wandering in the desert before arriving at the promised land." Kenta Rudy, I should have had you do that line. Sorry for choreograph next time. Now, for years, because I was small, I assumed the Israelites were consigned to 4 decades of languishing in the wilderness for the wild dance around the golden calf. Now, Hollywood could not have been wrong, could it? But so much more happens in our Torah before that generation would learn that they would not enter Canaan, that they would die in the desert while their descendants continued forward. And why was that? Because of the account in this week's Parashat, in Shlach Lecha, where we read of the incident of the spies. God tells Moses to send 12 scouts, one from each tribe, into Canaan. They are to gather intelligence about the land and those who lived there, and collect some native fruits, and report back. The men that are chosen to go are leaders of the Israelites. They are the Roshei V'nei Yisrael, the heads, the men of standing. We receive all of their names, including among them Caleb, son of Jephunneh from the tribe of Judah, and Hosea, son of Nun from the tribe of Ephraim. After we hear the names of everyone else, we are told that Moses changed the name of Hosea, son of Nun, to Joshua. We have a few instances of people's names being changed in the Torah. This is an unusual one. Hosea already has a Hey in his name, unlike Abram and Sarai, and his name is changed by being given another letter that suggests God, the Yud, very often standing for the name of God. Rashi teaches that this means Hosea, becoming formally Joshua, needed a little bit of extra protection, and that the Yud stands for, may God save you, Yehoshua, may you be saved from the malign influence of the other scouts. So maybe there was something a little bit more vulnerable about Joshua than we might have been thinking about thus far in the story, because he plays such an important part. But like all of our other leaders, he is vulnerable, and maybe this name change indicates that on some level. He needs a little extra protection. But regardless, because I just found that fascinating, these 12 princes, really, these heads of the tribes, come back 40 days later, and they bring a mixed message. It is a good land, they say, flowing with milk and honey, with gigantic produce, but its cities, they say, are similarly enormous, with colossal inhabitants of this land that devours its settlers, in Numbers 13. A massive collapse of confidence engulfs the vulnerable people, and all the Israelites threaten to kill Moses and Aaron. And God has had enough. Though God plans initially to wipe them all out, Moses persuades God to pardon, as you have said, which are words we still sing every year on Yom Kippur Eve. But though that generation will be spared, they will perish in the wilderness. I have a lot of compassion for the former slaves whose hearts grew faint, whose fragile self-esteem vanished utterly at the report of the spies. How easily we can give in to doubt when confronted with what we feel are overwhelming odds. We are ready to turn tail and run, despite the blessings and even miracles in our lives that should give us strength, but so often don't. But in the maelstrom of the report of the spies, there are 2 voices that stand out: Caleb and Joshua, dare to say, we are strong enough to fulfill this destiny. Now, much has been said about the moral ambiguity of the conquest of Canaan, and I think it is true then and now that we will likely grapple with the consequences of that conquest for the rest of Jewish history. Kachazeh. Thus it has been. But as prominent as Joshua is, as Moses' designated successor, a careful read of this history-defining tale actually has Caleb as the first singular voice of encouragement. In Numbers 13:30, it is Caleb alone that hushes the people before Moses. Vayahas Kalev et ha'am el Moshe. He hushed the people before Moses alone and said, "Let us by all means go up, and we shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome." We shall overcome indeed. Numbers 30, verse 30. Joshua, surprisingly, does not appear as Caleb's partner until chapter 14, when they both risk their lives to exhort the people to stay strong and be courageous. And even after that, God refers only to my servant Caleb, because he was imbued with a different spirit and remained loyal to me. Him I will bring into the land that he entered. That's Numbers 14, verse 24. Very strange. Later in the chapter, God refers to them together as the only two spies who will see the promised land. Reflection of different traditions, maybe, but maintaining Caleb as a singular voice is, I find, one of the more delicious nuggets in our Torah. I happen to love the name Caleb, one of my absolutely favorite names, but we had no one after whom we could name either of our children using the kaf, so it got relegated to the wonderful names that we loved but can't use pile. But it's just one of the best names ever, even though it's a little bit, maybe a little suspect in some ways. Hang on to that for a second. Because Caleb actually doesn't have a book that bears his name, right? As Joshua does. We heard from it today. His name means dog, Kelev, which isn't usually a compliment in the Bible, but for all of us dog lovers, it's wonderful. But his loyalty is clearly precious to God. And of course, loyalty is a central character trait of our beloved furry friends. He's usually portrayed as a sidekick to Joshua, but he is clearly his own man with his own voice, willing to stand up on his own, for which he is noticed and thanked by God. We know very little of Caleb. We rely on Midrash to fill in even a few details, such as the legend that once in Canaan, he visited the cave of the ancestors, which we read about the purchase of in Torah study the other day, to draw strength and inspiration. His name in this chapter, son of Yefune, he's called differently in other places, can be read as the one who turned away, suggesting independence, a willingness to stand apart, a breaking away from the mob, which takes a lot of courage. Despite the discrepancies in the text, the fact that these two spies stand together is ultimately enormously powerful. One lone voice can be regarded as an outlier, easy to ignore and drown out. But the two together made a poignant statement of alliance and agreement, paired together for all time as a bulwark against utter and absolute despair. Caleb and Joshua bolster one another in the deft hand of the redactor, and we are lifted and inspired by their faith. It is not unlikely that we might feel utterly alone while the world seems to be spinning out of control. I first explored this parsha and this version of it still in the depths of the pandemic. So I was speaking then about out of controlness, referring to the pandemic, but it just keeps spinning. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm holding on to keep from getting too dizzy. But maybe the example of Caleb and Joshua can help us keep hope alive. That if we band together, even just a couple people, we may yet have the strength to journey on. The Torah seems to know that even a great blessing is better carried by two people. I love this detail in this parsha because we are taught that the enormous grapes that signify the bounty of the land had to be borne on a carrying frame by two people. In this subtle way, we are prepared to behold the bravery of both Caleb and Joshua, two men who would carry the promise of Jewish destiny on their shoulders. May we have the strength to continue carrying that destiny forward. Shabbat Shalom.